Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, Elwood City Limits listener. It's Will here, and thankfully this is not going to be as disappointing as you may think. I know that I normally, when it's me starting off the episode of Elwood City Limits, I know that means, oh, I guess they weren't able to do one this week or something. Well, actually, not quite true. We do have an episode of Elwood City Limits coming, but unfortunately, Lucas not able to join me this week, so I had to find a pinch hitter, which we are going to get into in a little bit. You probably guessed it from the name on the title of the episode. It's the Frensky Star is going to be joining me to talk about this episode of Arthur. But before anything else, I wanted to get some of the plugs out of the way up top so that we can talk about the episode just straight on through. So, of course, welcome to the show. Will Young here, as always. I wanted to make sure to mention that one of the big things this week is Mark Brown's birthday. The Arthur of Author? Oh, no, that's not what I meant. The author of Arthur is celebrating his birthday this week, and I wanted to make sure to get that not out of the way, but mention it up top so I didn't forget. He was born November 25th, 1946. This year he is 75. Happy 75th birthday to Mark Brown, without whom, as mentioned by Vinny on the ECL Patreon Discord, we wouldn't have this podcast, we wouldn't have this show. And I think our lives are richer for all of the great stuff that Mark Brown has given us. I, of course, wanted to quickly mention a couple of emails here before we get started on the episode, as I always like to do. ElwoodCityLimits@gmail.com if you would like to send us any correspondence. I want to say a special thank you, speaking of those emails, to Casey Cosmos and Lissa, because they were two listeners who followed up with some sources for the Aglet mystery. That's been happening over the last couple of episodes of ECL. Lucas had some kind of a memory about some cartoon or television show talking about aglets, which are the plastic tips of shoelaces. Well, I think we've solved the mystery. Casey and Lissa found a source of it from Phineas and Ferb, and after conferring with Lucas, he believes that is indeed where he was thinking of aglets from. We'll let him answer for himself on the next ECL where he's able to join us, but thank you, Casey and Lissa. I think you just helped solve a mystery. Also got one here. This is just going to be very quick from Carter, who is talking about finding us from the Finding DW podcast, Jason Schwimmer's podcast, which, by the way, if you haven't gotten around to listening to the Finding DW podcast, make sure that you listen to it all. If you like Elwood City Limits, you'll love that show. And how we previously interviewed Dallas Jokic, one of the voices of Arthur. And he was wondering if there will ever be a Finding Arthur podcast. Well, Carter, maybe I'll see if I can put that in Jason's ear. That seems like something that Jason clearly has less of a difficulty with interviewing others. I know that that's something that we're able to do on this show every once in a while, but it's not so easy for me, as it is someone who is as charismatic and outgoing as Jason is. So maybe, I don't know. I know he's a busy guy, but maybe he'll want to find Arthur someday. Maybe. Anyway, Jason, if you're still listening, that's an idea for you. And one more email here from Yoshi. Dear Will, Lucas, and especially Mike. Okay. I hope you're doing well. Since the last time I wrote, the high school where I teach English and journalism has gone from online to in-person training, and we've been through a lot of challenges supporting students who haven't been in a classroom in a year and a half. I also moved houses 10 days before this school year started. Through all of this, I've been endlessly appreciative of all the humor, comfort, and stability that ECL and For the Kids, a PBS Kids podcast, have provided. Yoshi, one of our patrons, so she gets access to both podcasts. It's been a lot of change, but listening to you has brought me both a lot of comfort. Thank you for creating a space that makes people feel this way. I also wanted to tell you a story from school recently. A few weeks ago, I met a student who I don't have in any class, who was sent my way because he loves Arthur, and I'm known as the Arthur teacher around here. Oh, that rules. Would that be the Arthur teacher? Sure. Could you parlay that into becoming Ms. Ratburn? I don't know. We had the most enthusiastic and joyful conversation about Arthur, and now he comes and visits my classroom often. Even though in-person learning has come with turmoil over mask mandates and vaccines, this is the kind of interaction I missed when we were learning online. I even told the student to listen to Elwood City Limits, his first ever podcast. He said he enjoyed it. Do you remember a time you bonded with a teacher, classmate, or colleague over something you both really liked, besides each other and Arthur/wrestling? Well, if you take, if you take wrestling out of the equation, I've bonded with a couple of teachers over that. Well, yeah, and let's say in a professional setting. Well, and again, if you take wrestling out of that, I worked at a parking company as recently as last January, and I became such good friends with one of my supervisors there over professional wrestling, and this is actually a wrestling focused episode, so what do you know, that we ended up quitting the job on the same day, and now we're really good friends. But yeah, in that same vein, I bonded with somebody at that job over the Japanese Sentai series Kamen Rider. And in terms of teachers, nothing really leaps out at me immediately. I feel like comic books is probably something I also bonded with some professional figures over, but that's a couple of instances from my lifetime. Like I said, wrestling is the great gateway for me, the forbidden door, if you will, into making friends with people that I may normally have not. So don't knock it. But I'll have to pitch this question to Lucas when he's back. But thank you, Yoshi. Appreciate your patronage. Appreciate your email. Appreciate that you are the Arthur teacher. And, of course, the elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com if you want to send in your own email. We always appreciate it no matter what. Just want to take a moment to say thank you to our patrons. Now, I mentioned For the Kids, a PBS Kids podcast. That is our bi-weekly podcast where we basically give the ECL treatment to other PBS Kids shows. The most recent episode that we did last week was on the 2000 to 2003 adaptation of Clifford the Big Red Dog. That was a lot of fun to go through, actually. It was interesting to go back and remember that time in both of our lives when we were watching the same cartoon, me and Lucas, despite our age disparity. And now, coming up for patrons next week, well, Clifford's coming back because we've got a special ECL double movie review. It's going to be the new Clifford the Big Red Dog movie, followed by Dune? Yeah, what a weird double feature. I'm actually, the morning I'm recording this afternoon, I'm going to the movies to watch both of them. So we're going to see how that goes as like a double feature. But yeah, that's going to be coming up. Lucas and I are going to see both movies, and then we're going to talk about them. Lucas has been talking about Dune for the past several years and trying to read that book. And, of course, one of the biggest movies of this kind of fall season. And not often that I get out to a movie theater these days. But I wanted to give you guys a little something special, our first ever double movie review. So we'll see how that goes. That's going to be Patreon exclusive next week. Want to give a big thanks to new patrons such as Infra90, as well as returning patrons like Larry Brigitte and Howell Pendragon. We also have others like Ashley and Lauren Rodriguez, Cyril Della Rosa, and Anthony Williams, Anteater21. We have Awesome Eddie21. Oh, we have two 21s. I didn't know that. Emmy the Ghost, Vinny Cataldo, of course, Robert Morrison, Allison Archambault, Nicholas DeMarco, Ursula Katz, and going over to page 2, find folks like Yoshi herself, Pretty Cool Stairs, Aaron DeFilippo, Shayna Bennett, and let's say Ian Collis. And Light Relentless. There you go. If you, any of you patrons are like, hey, you haven't said my name in a while, just send me a message on Discord or on Patreon, and I can add you to the next roll. It's pretty random. If I skip you or if I say someone's name twice over these weeks, it's not intentional. That's just it. Anyway, that's what's going to be coming up on the Patreon, patreon.com/Elwood City Limits in the next week, and what we've already put up that you can check out. And, of course, our emails, I think that's pretty much it. We've managed to say happy birthday to Mark Brown, so I guess from here, we'll just take it over to my recording with the Frensky star. We're going to be talking about Mcfrensky and the good, the bad, and the Binky. Let's do it. Okay, back on Elwood City Limits. And yes, I do have a very special guest with me today. This is a great opportunity. Sometimes I know that, sometimes Lucas's work takes him to various places around the country and what have you. And this is one of those times. So it seemed like a good opportunity to get to know somebody who has been a big help to the podcast in the past, I'd say, year or so. And we're going to find out a little bit more about him, and we're going to talk about this episode of Arthur. Please welcome to the show, the Frensky star, aka Nick. Hey, Nick.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicholas DeMarco, and I am the founder and creator of the Frensky Star. And I'm so glad that Will invited me on this episode of Elwood City Limits to talk about Mcfrensky and the good, the bad, and the Binky.
Well, it actually ended up working out really well because Frensky is in the name of the episode we're talking about. So I was like, well, that seems like a pretty natural fit, all things considered. All right. So, in case people may not know, I know we've mentioned you on stream, we've mentioned you in the podcast. So, the Frensky Star is a new and rising star in the Arthur fan community. And I would really like to know a little bit more, Nick, about how you decided to start the Frensky Star. When did you decide to start it, and what's your goal with it?
Well, I decided to start the Frensky Star. It was, I think, the summer of 2020, and I was just in my YouTube suggested. It came up with like how to make a really cool like retro 90s looking website. Mm-hmm. And I just one day watched it and I saw it and it looked pretty simple. Like you just use pre-made HTML stuff, and I made it, and I thought, oh, what should I make the website on? And I thought Arthur was the perfect idea because Arthur's a show that ever since I can remember, I've been waking up before school and watching Arthur every single morning. And then I come back from school, watch it again. And it's just been so close to my life. So I thought I would create the blog. And actually, I didn't create it with a real web domain first. I created it with, there's this website, I forget what it's called, but it just kind of saves your HTML coding. And I made it, and you can still find it on the internet, but people actually found it. I didn't even share about it. And they said, oh, this is a great website and it needs to be a real website. So I bought the domain and did it. And I really get a lot of inspiration from it, from the Elwood City Downtown Core website.
Yeah.
Who you visited or talked about on your podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was a great time talking to Dave from the Elwood City Limits Downtown Core. That's so cool. I'm so glad to meet somebody else who was also inspired by that. And you know what? Now that you mention that, I do get kind of those vibes from your website. And so you are into you do a lot of episode reviews, text episode reviews is what I'm seeing a lot on your Instagram, which is also a big part of your marketing. So such as it is.
Yep, and now we have more people doing reviews, like Guthrie Edson does a ton of reviews for us, and he helped us work on that new documentary that we made. And also we have Awesome Eddie, who makes all the stickers. He did a couple reviews, so I think it's really great that people are writing in, doing reviews, and we have DJ Bob, who's working on a piece right now about Arthur, It's Only Rock and Roll that we're gonna release on our website. And if you, Will or Lucas, I know you have the podcast and you do your episode reviews on here, but if you ever have any writing piece you would like to share on the website, just feel free to message us.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't realize that was an option. That's awesome. Okay. I'm going to have to flex my writing muscle for Arthur. Haven't done that in a very, very long time, but that sounds great. And so does the content that you have coming up. Like I said, there's kind of like a little bit of a Arthur fan community forming. I mean, I know that it's been active for, so many years since the show has started, but it seems that in the last couple of years, people, like you mentioned, DJ Bob, yourself, me and Lucas, people like Peebs, just coming together around Arthur news, Arthur updates, and Arthur in review, as we're about to do. Well, I mean, this is kind of a natural question, I guess. We're going to be talking about Francine in the upcoming episode. Given that you're the Frensky star, is Francine your favorite character?
I don't know if she's my favorite character. She's up there with my favorites. I love my favorites are probably Binky, Francine, George. Those are really my three favorite characters.
Good picks.
Yeah, and we have a Binky episode coming up too, which, I mean, Binky episodes are always awesome.
It's a good time to hop on. And as I like to ask with everybody, what has your personal history been with Arthur? So we talked about, you obviously like it enough to start your website, which you mentioned. But when did you start watching Arthur, and what is it that made you become a fan of it, and what keeps you a fan of it?
Well, I've been watching Arthur for as long as I can remember. And the first season that I actually remember premiering was this season 13.
Okay.
So it's perfect that I'm doing a review for it. Actually, it was the back half of season 13 that I remember premiering. I don't remember these episodes, but yeah. And I used to go on the computer and search up like Arthur, and I was on the Arthur wiki, like very young, and I saw all the stuff, and I used to read the Elwood City Downtown Core when I don't think they were updating it, but it was still up. And I don't know, I just always loved watching Arthur every morning. And now I've really connected with it and a lot more, and seen a lot more, and took a deeper dive into the episodes and stuff. But I also went to, I remember when I was probably 5, I went to this Arthur thing at my local PBS station. They were doing an Arthur thing, and they handed out Arthur 10th anniversary stickers. Oh. And I got these collectible books and stuff. So yeah, I've always been attached to Arthur. It was probably like 2008.
Okay.
But they were still handing out, doing like Arthur 10th anniversary celebration. I don't know why, but it was like 2008, and they had people dressed up as Arthur and stuff. So, yeah,
that sounds awesome. I'm very jealous. I wish I could have gotten something like that when I was in elementary. Okay, we're gonna let you. We're gonna give you an opportunity at the end of the episode to direct everybody to where the Frensky Star is online. But I figured I could use somebody of a certain Arthur expertise for this pair of episodes. So the first one we're talking about, as I mentioned appropriately, is Mcfrensky, which I wanted to get this out of the way right off the top, because it's impossible to avoid from the name to so many references. This is an adaptation of Macbeth, the classic play by William Shakespeare. Nick, do you have any prior experience with Macbeth prior to Mcfrensky?
Yes, I read Macbeth in middle school, so after I watched this episode. But yeah, I watched Macbeth, but I actually didn't realize until... I knew they were quoting it and stuff a lot, but I didn't realize until I went on the Arthur wiki that like the whole plot follows like Macbeth from, getting a fortune and stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't want to spoil it too early until we go over it, but it goes through pretty much the whole thing, and I think the Arthur writers must have had a really fun time writing this episode.
I bet you're right. You can always tell with those types of episodes where it seems like the writers had a little bit more juice to go around. So that's interesting. I don't think I read Macbeth until, if not high school, then like early university. So you were really on the early track for that. That seems like a pretty hardcore play to read in middle school.
Yeah, I think we read it in 7th grade, which is that. Yeah, that's pretty young.
It's just, I remember watching some of the film adaptations in university, and it can get pretty bloody if you let it. So, interesting. Okay. And hardcore from an early age. So, the episode starts off with Francine and Muffy. They're going to go get their fortunes told by Prunella. This felt very appropriate. The wizard pondering her orb is very big these days. That gave me a chuckle. Prunella's doing okay. I don't remember which one it is. There's a different kind. I think it's cold reading. I want to say it's cold reading. That kind of psychic technique where you kind of throw out let's say a mental suggestion, and they could latch onto it or not. Of this like the you are very busy, or you're trying to balance career and life, that sort of thing. So I think Prunella is doing a little bit of the cold reading. But her prediction is that you will have lunch with a stranger, and then Arthur and Buster come in, ask Francine and Muffy to eat lunch with them, to which Muffy says, Buster's not a stranger, but he's stranger than anyone I know. So
yeah, that is a good line.
The entire matter of this episode, and you know what? So I have to admit, although the episode is called Mcfrensky, I didn't really catch on to this until right here. And because I suppose for the cold open, Prunella is supposed to be the Weird Sisters, who are the characters in Macbeth who predict the future, essentially. And Prunella is playing that role in one person. So the entire matter of this episode is that Francine is in the lead for a competition called Student of the Month. She's been apparently gunning for this the whole time. She even taught the second graders softball. And the winner of this competition is going to get lunch with the local weatherman, whose name is Thunder McDuff. To which then I realized, yes, that's why it's called Mcfrensky. Yes, ho ho, that's rich. We never get to... Now, you have more of a knowledge of later Arthur than I do, so this is a question I had for you. Do we ever get to meet Thunder McDuff?
No, we do not. This is all that we get of him.
Bummer. Like,
yeah.
with a name like that, I was picturing, a big, gregarious character. So that's too bad. I would have really liked to see Thunder McDuff. I mean, unless he shows up in, what little episodes we have left of the show. But somehow I doubt it. And
it says Macduff is supposed to be a play on McDuffie, I believe, from Macbeth.
Yeah, the character's name is I believe it's just Macduff, which is Macbeth, which is if I'm not, it's been a while since I've watched. The film version I'm thinking of is Akira Kurosawa's Throne of Blood. So I'm getting the character names mixed up there. But I believe Macduff is Macbeth's friend, who he eventually betrays, if I'm not mistaken. Oh God, I studied Shakespeare in university. I feel like a bad English degree haver now. Anyway, Francine seems all set to win. It's like a point system. It's like the House Cup in Hogwarts or something. But Brain, I guess the appropriate way to say this is, poop hawks Francine's position he comes in late, which loses him a couple points, but it was because he was helping to fix a teacher's flat tire and then returning a wallet with money in it. And he even did an interesting science project. It's like a log with hinges on it to show the bugs underneath. I mean, that's cool and all. I suppose it's my anti-brain bias a little bit to be like, we can't prove that he returned the wallet. We just kind of have his word to go on.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of awkward having Brain come in like this. And Brain ruins a lot of things, so it's only fitting though that he ruins this for Francine. And I don't think Brain really was gunning for getting this lunch with Thunder McDuff. I don't know how much he would enjoy that. That sounds like more like a Francine and Muffy thing.
Yeah, you're right. I should ask, do you have any characters you can't stand? We talk about that as much as characters we like.
Not really. I Brain in certain episodes, and then Prunella in some, and Rubella in others. Those are really my only ones off the top of my head.
Fair enough. I know that, and it's okay. Like I would never encourage people to have least favorite characters on Arthur. Sometimes it just you might get annoyed here and there, but otherwise, it's okay if it's all love. So yes, Brain ends up stealing the Student of the Month. He's in the lead. He doesn't take it yet. So Francine and Muffy, I have in parentheses mostly Muffy, create a plot to have Francine win again. And the plot is so Buster has this new robot toy. It's very complex. It's got like claw hands. It can talk. It shoots slime, as we see later. And so Muffy plans to have it stolen because she notices Brain has an interest in it, like a totally innocent interest. So they're going to manufacture its theft, let's say, and pin it on the Brain, which actually ends up working. They take the robot, they put it in Brain's backpack, and it looks like Brain stole it. And they manage to do this all in front of Mr. Ratburn so that he loses points for both disrupting class when the robot talks in his backpack and for stealing the robot, allegedly.
Yeah, this is very sneaky by Muffy. She even like has the remote in her hand and then slips it very sneakily into Brain's backpack so she doesn't get caught.
I found this interesting. It's very what is the name? And maybe you're better with names. The episode where Muffy runs for class president.
Oh, wait, what is it that you're trying to?
So I just mean that Muffy is acting a lot in this episode like she was in that one. She's very conniving. She's very underhanded.
Devious?
Devious, yes.
Yeah, I actually wrote that this is like the most devious we've seen with Muffy since like How the Cookie Crumbles, I think. And that was a long time ago when she turned on all her friends.
That's a good shout, actually. That's a really good comparison. I mean, she has this in her for sure, but we just it never really comes out until, of course, she's playing the analog to Lady Macbeth, who is, depending on your interpretation, one of the more devious characters in Shakespeare's canon. So she is the one making all the machinations, and in this, so one of the things about Macbeth is that you can it's up to interpretation how much Macbeth is in on the plan to, in Macbeth, kill Macduff and become the King of Scotland, if I remember that correctly. Sorry, I might be getting like little facts wrong, but essentially to assume power. And I've seen some productions where it's like he is behind it and Lady Macbeth is his helper. In other ones, Lady Macbeth is the knowledge behind the throne, and Macbeth's kind of a patsy. So in this one, Francine is kind of playing the patsy. She's going along with it, but it is mostly Muffy's idea. We even get a little, I loved this. There's a couple of really, really good Macbeth references in here. So Prunella, they go back to Prunella and see if Francine will, remain the student of the month. And Prunella says, "You will remain student of the month until the moon is blotted out in a single swallow," which, like in the original play, I believe it's when the forest moves towards the castle is when Macbeth will not be king anymore. So something that sounds outrageous.
Sounds impossible.
Exactly. But in a way, it does end up happening.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a little quote here where Arthur and Buster tell Francine they're going to launch an independent investigation, so to speak. They are going to, they feel it's out of Brain's character to steal Buster's robot, so they're going to figure out who actually stole it. And Francine imagines the toy robot like looming giant behind Arthur and Buster, and this is almost word for word from the play, from Act 2, Scene 1 of Macbeth. "Is that an alien I see before me, or are you an invader of my mind?" and the way it's phrased, you're just like, that doesn't sound like
Francine.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But it works well enough that it's not completely out of place. I really liked that.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, you and Lucas really liked the dream sequences, and there were two of them in this one. So how did you feel about these dream sequences?
Well, I mean, I have this sounds like such a brag. I don't mean it to be. I have the complete works of Shakespeare on my bookshelf, so of course I loved this. I thought this was great with the quote and everything. So I was for it. Did you like it as well?
Yeah, I did like it. It's not my favorite one is when like everything falls from the sky. I think it's in Bleep, and like the moon, Mary Moo Cow jumps over the moon. That's my favorite one. 'Cause that's all out crazy. And the one with Arthur in chains. But this one was pretty good too.
So at this point, Francine and Muffy are going to try and make a plan to throw off Arthur and Buster and to undermine them. Their plan is to make them look untrustworthy. And again, this is all Muffy's plan. They're doing it in the dark by like flashlight, which is a way that, again, I've seen it staged before. Like Macbeth and Lady Macbeth by like candlelight are going over this plan, this plot. But again, I loved this. So earlier in the episode, when Francine takes the robot out of Buster's locker, she gets squirted with what looks like slime. Later, it's like green ink. And Francine is having a dream, and she's trying to wash off the green ink in the sink, but this is another almost direct reference to Macbeth, where there is a scene in that play where Macbeth is trying to wash the blood off of his hands. And that's where we get the line, out darn spot, out damn spot in the play. And that's what Francine says. She says, out darn spot, when she can't get the slime off of her hands. And then she gets menaced by the toy robot. That was great. Again, another really excellent reference.
Yeah, and the slime, when she tries to wipe it all over, it just keeps spreading, so it keeps getting worse.
You're right. And then Muffy wakes her up because she was sleepwalking and washing her hands in the sink. So it wasn't real. The ink was never on her hands at all, which is also the same for Macbeth. At lunch the next day, we find out, so Prunella's prediction does come true, and Muffy is the one to witness it. The moon being blotted out in one swallow is Buster eating a moon cake in one bite. And when I say moon cake, it is literally the same as a moon pie, or, for Canadians, it would be a Joe Louis. It's one of those, like, wagon wheel type things. And Buster, Arthur even says, like, don't choke on it. Buster eats it in one swallow, which seems incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, he one throats this whole moon pie, and I thought this was really funny and creative how they used Buster's eating habits to fulfill Prunella's prediction. That was really creative by the Arthur team.
It really, I didn't know where that was going. I was like, I know that they're gonna fulfill this somehow, but I don't know how. So it was very interesting to watch, and yeah, it just. My throat feels tight just thinking about it. Ugh. Eventually, we get near the end of the episode where I believe Muffy's plan is to... She puts, the answers to a spelling bee or spelling quiz, near Arthur and Buster's chairs, I believe it is?
Yeah. Right, on the legs of the desk, maybe.
Yeah, basically plants evidence to make them look untrustworthy. And they are found out, quote-unquote, but Francine decides the guilt is too much, and she decides to confess. And the girls come clean. Brain jumps to the top of the student of the month. And then at the end of the episode, both of them have to do community work. And the Brain gets the lunch with Thunder McDuff and actually invites Francine. But she decides that she's going to go help the second graders with softball because it's fun. She actually enjoyed doing it. She's not just doing it for the class award. We get a great line from Muffy here. They're forced to do a little bit of manual labor. They have to, I think rake leaves in the schoolyard. Typically, enforced community service is an infringement on my rights, but I thought a court battle would be drawn out and expensive. Classic. Yeah, and that's how the episode wraps up. It was, we'll talk about it a little bit more at the end, but boy, I am just so impressed that they aside from the murders and the fact that Macbeth is a tragedy, they managed to follow the play quite well.
Yeah, and to bring something, Macbeth, it's good that it's in Arthur because it's such a monumental and classic piece of literature, but yeah, they turned something so bloody into something very kid-friendly with a deep message.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're going to get into the second part of our Arthur episode right after this.
Hey everybody, it's Lucas from the Elwood City Limits podcast, and if you love ECL, there's a couple of ways to keep up with us. You could go to facebook.com/Elwood City Limits, at ECL Podcast, that's our Twitter. We take questions on Tumblr. It's elwoodcitylimits.tumblr.com. There is an Instagram as well, Elwood City Limits on Instagram. Of course, if you want to donate to the show and get exclusive content, whether that's our full-length commentary of the Arthur movies, our brand new bi-weekly PBS Kids review show, as well as our video game movie reviews with the Sonic movie review and Pikachu movie review, you can check out patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. And that's also going to get you access to the Elwood City Limits Discord, which me and Will like to post in from time to time. And if you want that sweet, sweet Elwood City Limits merch, check out teespring.com/stores/Elwood-City-Limits-store. You can listen to the podcast at libsyn.com/Elwood City Limits, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and there's other podcast apps like Stitcher, and if we're not on your favorite app, let us know. And where can you let us know? Well, that's going to be at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. That's also where you can send us a question, and we'll read it on the show. Finally, if you want to support the podcast, the best way to do so is to tell a friend who likes animation or Arthur or just podcasts in general, and to go to our iTunes page and rate us out of 5 stars. Apparently, that helps podcasts out. Bye, everybody!
So the good, the bad, and the Binky. We go from a Frensky episode to a Binky episode. Like you said, Nick, it's a good week to be helping me to review this. So we're talking all about what a role model is, or we end up talking about that. This is another we've been mentioning in the past season or two. I think it may have started in season 12. They're really using a lot of the Arthur lore. Such as it is, because this cold open is in Pizza Paula's restaurant.
Yep, from Sleep No More, which was season 4 or 5.
Man, we need you around. If you had asked me when Sleep No More was, I would have been like, season 6? Question mark. My memory is so bad for that. So I'm glad that you have a little bit of a better memory of that. So. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Like Pizza Paula's, I'm used to it being, that theme park. But have we ever seen the restaurant before?
I think we saw it in Is That Kosher when Arthur wins the pizza thing. But that could have been the Pizza Land too. But let me just check. Yeah, this is the last appearance of Pizza Paula's that we're going to see.
We don't see it anymore?
No, this is the last appearance, according to the wiki, and I don't believe we see it after this.
Bummer. Yeah. Well, the wiki usually knows what it's talking about. I got some of my information for this episode from there, such as Buster points out a poster of his role model, which is a man named Yamada Taro, who ate 22 slices of pizza in 10 minutes and is the world record holder. Now, I thought for a second this might have been a real guy. Like, I thought maybe... Yamada Taro was a real champion eater, and we were going to see him later. But I don't think so. I also checked the wiki, and it seems that he only shows up in this poster. Mm-hmm. Which, too bad. I mean, that could have been an interesting character. Well, again, maybe in the last few episodes we have left. You never know.
Yeah, he could have been at the pizza eating competition way back when. Yeah.
Keep a lookout. So this is where DW asks and finds out what a role model is. And she says, and the fact that anyone can be a role model to anybody. And she says, well, there's one person who's my role model, and he's in my family. And Arthur's like, oh, like, I don't know how Arthur, made this leap, but he's just like, I'm your role model? And she's like, no, Dad. I would have expected her to say pal before Arthur, honestly.
Yeah, that was a good line from DW.
Yeah. And it ends up with Binky coming in and stealing one of Arthur's pepperonis from his pizza. And then he kind of ends up taking the whole pizza, really.
Yeah, this is a great part. Like, Binky pulls off, he's like, this is going to cost you 1 pepperoni, and takes off all the cheese with the pepperoni. And it's just bread and sauce.
Pizza theft of the highest degree. And, well, as if you couldn't tell from the title, it is indeed a Binky episode. So we actually get a continuation from the cold open. Neither of these cold opens in this episode are the ones where, Arthur addresses the camera, or we play around with, the meta nature of the show. We just continue where Binky goes to Arthur's place. In a bid to raise money, he brings Arthur several sugar packets on a silver dinner tray.
Yeah, and many of them are unopened, or already opened, and they're strewn all across the tray.
And Binky is like, pay me for this service that you didn't ask for. But what he's trying to raise money for is the World of Wrestling is coming to Elwood City with their Spring Smackdown, but tickets are $50, which I find interesting because, obviously World of Wrestling is meant to be a takeoff on the WWE. Usually for those live events, you can get tickets, the cheapest tickets are still pretty cheap. $50 is when you start getting into the lower bowl territory. You can usually go to those shows for fairly inexpensive if you don't mind sitting in the nosebleeds. But Binky is determined to go, and he really needs to find out ways to make cash. And Arthur gives him a tip that Emily's parents are looking for a babysitter for her. Now, I hope I didn't miss a line of dialogue here. Emily talks about her. Where's Marie-Hélène?
Yeah, I didn't catch that either. I didn't even realize that. Like, yeah, she normally babysits Emily.
Yeah,
I don't know what she might be on vacation.
Could be. It's I was almost expecting like a single line of like, yeah, she's on vacation or da 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 da. Because Marie-Hélène, I figured, was like almost like a live-in nanny situation from when we've seen her before.
Yeah, I think that might be the only, or something happened and she had to leave unexpectedly. But yeah, I don't think it's explicitly stated.
It's just a little strange. They normally are pretty good about giving like one sentence toss-off lines like that just to explain. So Binky is going to babysit Emily for the night at least, while her parents are just next door. And they don't exactly gel. Binky does not make dinner like Marie-Hélène does. He doesn't quite play along with Emily when she does a tea party. There's a really funny part where Binky's watching the clock. He gets off at 8 and it's almost 7, and everything starts to slow down, and you just hear Emily go, "Isn't that terrible, Binky?" I really liked it because, of course, Emily, Marie-Hélène's influence, uses French quite a lot, or at least like French affectations. There's even a part later when Binky is reading her a bedtime story, and it's Bonne Nuit. What's
Renee?
Renee, thank you. And of course, Binky is just like Bonne Nuit Renee. And Emily has to practically coach him through, which I found funny because Bruce Dinsmore, who plays Binky, who is a native Canadian and, not to blow up a spot or anything, but lives in the Quebec area, which is the French-Canadian area of Canada. I love that he has to pretend to not know how to pronounce fairly simple French words, when I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if Bruce is probably fluent to some degree in French. So yeah, Binky is not exactly into babysitting Emily, but when he gets some time to himself, he watches some World of Wrestling on TV, and then Emily sits next to him and kind of starts to get into it a little bit as Binky explains that it's pretty similar to dance. In fact, we get some more Uncle Slam here, who is, I guess, for lack of a better comparison, he's the Hulk Hogan, he's the John Cena of World of Wrestling. He's always on there. He's a top guy. But we get a little extended piece of wrestling where he fights Tiny Tornado, who is most likely the Rey Mysterio of the Arthur world. He's described as very very dancer-like, very athletic and graceful. But Uncle Slam ends up winning anyways. And Emily kind of gets into it because Binky is able to relate it to dance. As we find out later, Emily's very excited to see Mice on Ice, which is ice ballet, which will end up coming into play near the end of the episode.
Yeah, and I like how Binky really builds up Tiny Tornado here, and then he really does nothing, just jumps basically. Just Uncle Slam does a slight dodge and duck, and Tiny Tornado flies out of the ring.
In this really weirdly, it looks like he puts on the brakes in mid-air. His descent is very slow, which of course it's one of those. As much as I know that professional wrestling is not real, this is one of those rules that doesn't apply to wrestling. It's unless it's a very specific type of match, when a guy leaves the ring, he doesn't automatically lose. But I don't want to get into it too much. That's neither here nor there. We also get a glimpse of Emily's parents. Now, this is something that Lucas and I spoke about in an earlier episode, but Emily is one of the few characters who has parents that are of two different species. And it's never really commented on. It's never made a big deal of, but I just found it interesting. An interesting curiosity among all of the Arthur characters.
Oh, wow. I actually never noticed that. What is The mother is a bunny, right?
The mother's a bunny, and it looks like the father is like a monkey. He looks similar to Francine and her family's character design.
Yeah, okay, I'm looking at him right now. Yeah, wow, that is you got a good eye for that, Will.
I think it was just on my mind because we were talking about it in a previous Emily focused episode. It did come up somehow. Anyway, I just found it interesting and made me kind of take notice there. So I wanted to make sure, I was paying extra attention because I knew that you were going to be on the show, Nick, and I knew that sometimes I'm not the most observant person. So I was like, I got to be on my best behavior because Nick's going to notice stuff like that. So through wrestling, they're able to bond a little bit. Binky hangs out with Emily, and he gives her an old Uncle Slam jacket that he had when he was younger. It's one of those like black leather with red sleeves kind of thing. Almost looks like a varsity jacket. Mm-hmm. And Emily begins to take after Binky in behavior in preschool. She actually bonds a little bit with the Tibble twins over describing and acting out wrestling. And DW is not so much a fan of this because Emily is now a more burpy and shovey version of herself, which she attributes to Binky. There is a point where Binky and Emily have like a burping contest. Emily burps and she's very self-conscious about it, but then Binky's like, "Is that all you got?" And then they go back and forth with burps. So the whole thing is that Binky Binky is told basically by DW and Arthur that he is something of a bad influence, and that goes to his head. We get an imagination sequence here, as you mentioned, Nick, and it's about Binky. It's a little bit more simple than some of the other imagination sequences,
but it's still good.
Binky imagines himself, he's in jail, it's the whole nine. He's got the striped pajamas, the striped hat, he's behind bars. Arthur goes to visit him and gives him a talking bionic bunny doll so he can have someone to talk to. And then he pulls the string on the doll, and the doll burps. And then Arthur's like, "You are a bad influence." You like this one too, did you?
Yes, I did like this one. And you're right, it's very simple, but it's done and it's executed really very well.
Yeah, you don't need to necessarily make them all very complicated. It's just that sometimes you never know when it's going to be something like this, or when it's going to be something like, they create this monster with its own name or something, depending on how they feel, I guess. So Binky realizes his error here and decides to talk to Emily that, some of the stuff that he taught her isn't exactly correct. I don't think we get so much into that because the climax of the episode, such as it is that Binky's been talking about he wants to go to Spring SmackDown, but Emily invites him to see Mice on Ice, which is at the same night. Like they're both at the same time, so I'm guessing that these must be at two different arenas, essentially.
Yeah, because I don't know how many venues they have, but it would. I think, the one where the Backstreet Boys played at, you would think that they would, two big, production things would be at that place because it's probably the biggest. There's also the venue where You Stink, or not You Stink.
We Stink?
Binky.
Oh,
Binky,
Binky.
the band performs. And that one's maybe a little smaller, but it could be there.
It certainly could be. When we've had the WWE in Halifax, they have been at at both places. And let's see, wrestling in 2008 when this would have aired, I think, or sorry, when did season 13 start airing?
2008 or 9, I believe.
Okay, so wrestling around then, not exactly. It's WWE's doing fine, I guess, but it's done better. So I wouldn't be surprised if they had to go to the smaller venue if we're doing a one-to-one comparison of World of Wrestling and WWE, which we might as well. So for whatever reason, they are at two different places, and Binky decides to forego Spring SmackDown to see Mice on Ice because Emily is like, well, we can go to wrestling, and then Binky's like, all right, we'll go to see Mice on Ice to encourage Emily to be herself. That's what he encourages her to do, is don't do what I do, be yourself. And when they go to see Mice on Ice, Emily is the one who teaches Binky, actually, there's quite a bit of wrestling in this too. It's one of those Lord of the Dance style shows where there's like a plot line and there's a little bit of action, so Binky ends up getting into it.
Yeah, and I thought that was really sweet and big of Binky for him. You know, he was a good person to agree to go with Emily, and kind of fixes his wrong. I don't know if Binky did specifically something very wrong. He just showed Emily what he liked and was interested in. But you know, he taught that there was a good balance. Like, you don't have to be all aggressive and into wrestling and take it out on other people, and you can also like both things.
Absolutely. I also appreciated that. I just feel like so many times, and that this is more in real life, when you try to introduce wrestling to somebody or try to explain it, it's often like, well, it's a little bit of dance, it's a little bit of theater, it's a little bit of comic books, It's not often that something else uses wrestling to compare itself, whereas Emily is like, yeah, this like ice dancing is kind of like wrestling in a way that's meant to attract Binky to it. So I don't know, I thought that was a really funny first of, like, there's not often where you can say to somebody, hey, this is like wrestling, and it's a good thing, you know, you know, for someone to compare it in such a way. So very novel, I thought. Well, that's both of those episodes covered from top to bottom. Nick, as I always like to do, I'm going to throw it to you. Tell me your thoughts on Mcfrensky. What did you think of this one as an Arthur story?
I really liked it, and after I went to the wiki and saw how much it was like Macbeth, you know, with Prunella making the predictions, and then Muffy convincing Francine to steal, and then stealing, and then getting into more trouble to, like, stop Arthur and Buster from finding out. I really liked this episode. My one problem with it was it's not really a characteristic that Francine is easily influenced. You know, she's kind of independent and doesn't take other people's thoughts into much consideration, but I was fine with it because, you know, there have been times when Muffy has influenced her. You know, Muffy's her best friend, and yeah, and so I thought I was fine with that. But overall, I thought it was a good episode.
Awesome. I liked it too. I think it's just, I got such a kick out of the fact that it's basically just Macbeth for kids. And you mentioned it a bit earlier. Arthur's really good at adapting stories to fit its narrative. We have had it sometimes where it's literally just, well, it's Arthur's version of this childhood story. But there are some times where they manage to adapt like stuff that you'd never expect, like an Agatha Christie novel or something. They manage to fit it to the designs of the show and do it in a way that it feels natural, and that doesn't, you know, it's very different from something like Macbeth, but it keeps the spirit. And I thought that it was a really cool way to interact with that. You know, Arthur is one of the PBS shows that is the most subtle about its educational content. A lot of it is kind of teaching social messages and stuff like that. But sometimes it is literally about teaching you about this story that you may have never encountered as a child. So I really liked it. You know, if you didn't know that it was a Macbeth, I'm going to say adaptation. I was almost going to say parody, but it's not. It probably plays it pretty straight. If you didn't know it was a Macbeth adaptation, I don't know if it would be particularly strong for you, but knowing that made it so much better. I think that it was cool to see everybody play the roles from the play, which I would encourage anybody out there, if you haven't, if you're able to read Shakespeare, read it. If not, I would definitely recommend you check out either a stage production or a movie adaptation. In fact, I believe there's one coming out this year, the Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand. So check that one out if you haven't. I hear it's quite good.
Is it for which Shakespeare play is it for?
I believe it's for Macbeth, if I'm not mistaken.
Macbeth? Oh, okay.
Or no. You know what? I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm going to look this up really quick. I want to say it is Macbeth, and I believe it's also the Coen brothers, if I'm not mistaken. So that's been on my radar ever since they announced it. So just give me 1 second. Thankfully I can. Yes, The Tragedy of Macbeth is coming out this year. If it hasn't come out already. Yeah. Okay, so it's been around the film festival circuit. It's going to be on Apple TV Plus coming out early next year, like January. So keep Mcfrensky in mind and see how well they adapted it when you see a more traditional adaptation. Anyway, I quite liked this one. The English major in me was quite happy, and it was a good use of the Arthur characters in these roles. I think that Muffy, it's very interesting when Muffy gets to be a little bit more conniving, and yeah, I don't have much more to say about that. The Good, the Bad, and the Binky I thought was okay. Like, it wasn't really my favorite anything. It is a Binky episode, so I'm going to be a bit more kind to it than normal. But I felt that Binky wasn't necessarily as funny as he normally is. But that's okay. It was interesting to see. He has a very good dynamic with the child characters. And in the past, I've been a little bit critical of the episodes that are based around DW or Emily or the Tibble twins. So I think the way to solve that is to put one of the older characters in with them. And Binky, we know that Binky and DW have great chemistry. This also turns out Binky's just a good character for the kids to bounce off of, whether it's the Tibbles or Emily or whoever. And it was interesting seeing how Binky can influence people in the not so great way. It felt a little soft in terms of stakes necessarily. Not that every Arthur episode needs to have big time stakes, but I wasn't so much drawn to the whole thing of like, oh no, Emily's acting like Binky, and I'm like, good. I don't like her that much, so have her act like Binky. I don't care. But in the end, I think it was a nice a little soft episode now and then is not so bad. And of course, I really liked all the attention paid to wrestling personally. But this one was pretty good. Not amazing, but I'll leave it at that noise.
Yeah, I thought this episode was pretty good, and I think you're right. It's a good duo, Emily and Binky, because Emily is sometimes played out as the character who, from DW's viewpoint, is like better than her, gets to have a nanny, gets a lot of special privileges. So I think it was good that she was put with Binky, who's a very likable character. And they really seem to bond really well together and go well together. And I think also I really liked this cold open. I think that's my favorite part. And the beginning of the episode with the little joke where Binky brings in the sugar packets, and those were probably my highlights. So I'm pretty similar with these episodes. They're both good, not amazing, but yeah, I think that's what I think. And it really shows how Binky, when he puts his mind to something, he really can accomplish a lot. Like how he worked hard, he did all these chores to earn money for the SmackDown, and I think that's a good characteristic for Binky for the episode to bring up time and time again.
Yes, he at least wanted to earn his money and not steal it, so that's always good.
Yeah.
Binky does have a bit of an industrious side to him. Well, that's gonna wrap it up for this episode of Elwood City Limits, and I want to say, of course, a big thank you to Nick, aka the Frensky Star, for joining us for this one. Nick, it's been great to have you here, and it's really, I'm making it something of our mission to promote the Arthur community such as it is. I mean, I know that we're a bit of a part of it, as nebulous as it can be, but I think that you and others like Peebs are a really big part of it, because you do a lot of the work to keep it going. So please let everybody know where the Frensky Star can be found.
You can find us on our website is www.thefrenskystar.com. That's where we have our reviews, the news, and we're going to post a bunch of articles on there. And if you just want a nostalgia feel for our website, you can go to our website because it looks pretty old school. We're also on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We also have a Tumblr too, which I would like to start using more. But yeah, that is where you can find the Frensky Star.
Great to know. And if you'd like a Frensky Star sticker, you can hit up AwesomeEddie21 on Instagram. I've got some myself. So I'm just trying to find a good place. It's hard to find a good place to put a sticker because I'm just like, well, I don't want to lose the sticker forever in case it's on something that I have to throw away or eventually lose. They're such good stickers, but I'll find something. So Nick, again, big thanks. Thank you for pinch hitting for Lucas, and really appreciate your insights and your knowledge. You're a great part of the Arthur community, and it's good to have you as a listener and now as a co-host and friend of the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Well, this was awesome.
So next time on Elwood City Limits, and that's going to be coming up in about 2 weeks. I believe Lucas will be in the clear for this one, and I'm glad because this is going to be a big one. And I'm still trying to figure out exactly how we're going to talk about it. It's the Great McGrady, which is one of the more, as I've understood it, I've never seen it before, but I'm to understand that it's one of the more serious episodes of Arthur. And we also know that maybe Nick, actually, maybe you know the season of this. It was recently remade entirely.
Yeah, it was just remade in season 24, the last season. It was the premiere of the last season.
Okay, so we're going to have to figure out exactly how we want to talk about this, but there is a lot to talk about. It's one of the more noteworthy Arthur episodes from this era of the show. So I'm going to make sure to do some research, going to make sure to probably watch both versions of the episode, and we'll figure out exactly how we're going to present it to you. But that's what's going to be happening, Elwood City Limits. You know what's coming up on Patreon. I said it at the top of the show. And other than that, make sure that you check out the Frensky Star. Follow them on any social media that they're a part of, and read their websites. Read their episode reviews. Who knows? You might see a familiar name. I guess my typing wouldn't be that familiar, but yeah, you might see a familiar name there. But otherwise, there's some great names who are doing some excellent content over there. So for Nick and the Frensky Star, my name is Will Young. I didn't think about how I'm gonna end this episode. I'll just say, out. Darn pod out, I say. We'll see you next time.